impossible has happened! Unbelievable! No record for human life! Off to the races, can they catch it?
Now he takes off the shirt. He's running down the middle by the 50. He's at the 30. He's bare-chested and banging his chest. Now he runs the opposite way. He runs at the 50. He runs at the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms. Bare-chested. Somebody stop
Look
that
out,
man.
here comes the blue coat,
Oh,
Kevin.
they got him.
Here
They're
comes the
coming
blue
from the
coats.
left. Oh, and they tackle him at the 40-yard line.
I'm talking about balls deep. I'm talking about balls deep. I'm talking about balls deep in love. I'm talking about balls deep. I'm talking about balls deep. I'm talking about balls deep in love.
And now for our feature presentation.
Balls Deep with Devin Jovan.
Again.
We back.
Take
I got
four.
it. Let's take 3. What you mean? Give me some.
Nah, there's another one.
All right, but I
Somewhere.
killed 2 flies. How many you get? All right, Tim. My stats is way better than yours. I'm carrying the 2 right now.
With no vision. Can't see anything.
Facts.
He's like, where?
Yo, wax on, wax off. I just smelt it.
It's Bruce Lee, bro. Wax on, wax off type of shit. Karate Kid style.
Basically.
50 years have passed.
What's up, everybody? We're back with another episode of Balls Deep Podcast. Today we're going to talk about some NBA and NFL news. Starting with the NBA and some big-time players testing positive for coronavirus, and a few leaving the bubble even. We could start with, Russell Westbrook and James Harden, who both tested positive for coronavirus on the Rockets, which is going to be a huge loss for the Rockets, obviously.
I think they'll be back before action starts. I mean, the important action, because they'll definitely be back by playoff time.
Yeah.
I think, if anything, they'll miss some scrimmage games before, and possibly some regular season games, maybe the first few. I know Russell Westbrook, so we're recording now on the 21st. The 20th, so yesterday, he was to report to Orlando with the rest of the team. He didn't fly with the rest of the team originally, but that was because he tested positive, and he was to report. And I know Mike D'Antoni said he wasn't planning on having him play for the first scrimmage game, so that's big. I don't know when Harden's supposed to report, and I know 2 other players from the Bucks is going to play a big part too, like Eric Bledsoe. Eric Bledsoe is a big piece to that team. His injury last year in the playoffs hurt. And then with Pat Connaughton, he's more of a role player, but he's a shooter. So all of those players are just big players. So luckily it's now and not later. I mean, so far within everyone that they've tested within the bubble, there's no one that's tested positive yet. So that's a good start. Hopefully it continues, and hopefully all this Corona stuff in regards to the NBA ends once the season starts, and we can just get started and focus on the play.
Yeah, definitely. Ultimately, I feel like you said, those guys will be back, come, big time playoff time. But at the same time, it gets you wondering, they're not going to be able to, like you said, do scrimmages with their team. They're not going to be able to practice only probably individual workouts on their own. So, obviously they playoff season, they build up chemistry, they get in a rhythm. This is unlike any other season we've ever seen before. So we really don't know how players are going to come back, having to stop their season right before the end of the season and then come back and restart. We're not going to really know what kind of rhythm, those teams are going to have missing players like that, especially the Rockets missing, their 2 best players. So That's probably the biggest thing for me when I think about it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying before or on the prior episode was that I wonder what's going to happen when there is a positive test within the bubble. Because with these players, it's outside the bubble. Once they test negative, they can report, but then they still have to quarantine and lose time, like you said, with their team and things like that. So just hopefully we don't have to face the case where someone tests positive within the bubble. But if it does happen, I'm kind of curious on how they handle it.
It's a great sign that so far there's been no positive tests. Obviously, if these guys do what they're supposed to do and, you know, take those precautions the right way, I feel like we really shouldn't see anything there in a bubble, which is why it's called the NBA bubble.
They might as well just call it the 2K neighborhood.
Yeah,
they added a barbershop.
The barbershop.
And to be honest, that barbershop looked better than half the barbershops I've seen before.
I mean, it's the NBA barbershop.
I know, but it's fly.
You're about to have some whack ass barbers though.
I think they probably the players recommended
probably
those
get their own
players.
barbers and stuff. Yeah.
So
Not getting no cut from Supercuts or something.
to move on to other NBA news, Zion Williamson, he left the bubble for family matters. It's undisclosed because it's a private matter, but it is so that he will return at a later date with his team. For me, I just think it's gonna be tough because he did lose most of the season due to injury, and then when he did return, the team got better. So for him to lose this time with his team now, going into this return where the Pelicans need to make a push for that 8th seed, that lost time is going to hurt massively. But I think being a freakish athlete, he's going to be able to just return like no tomorrow. Almost like Dennis Rodman when he went to Vegas and came back.
Almost kind of like what he did at Duke when he came back and he just
Yeah.
went off. But, I mean, with Zion, it almost seems a little different because it seemed like during the season when he first came back from his injury, it was almost like immediately. Like he immediately made that impact.
Yep.
So for me, I don't see it being too hard for them to be able to continue to make that push for the 8th. I think so long as he gets back and is out of, his quarantine before the season starts or the new season starts, I feel like, their chances of making the playoffs, the Pelicans' chances of making the playoffs are still fairly well.
For the regular season games aren't really as important to most of the teams that are returning, but for teams like the Pelicans, the regular season is going to play a big part because they pretty much need to almost go undefeated in order to get or to secure that 8th seed. I mean, they do got to play the Lakers if they do make the playoffs, but it's one thing to another. It's almost like you want to see a team that has young talent like that prosper and kind of make that step.
But ultimately, I mean, I feel like having to face a team like the Lakers may play in their favor. I mean, you have a team like the Lakers who's already, a lock there where they're at. I mean, they might have to win a few more games, but ultimately they're a lock and they're fine wherever they are. So who knows? Maybe we'll see them rest players earlier. Maybe they'll try to get players to get games in because of that missed time. But ultimately, every game for the Lakers right now is a scrimmage until playoff time. So, I mean, it maybe end up doing them a favor, the fact they face teams like that.
I mean, I'm rooting for the Pelicans. I know I like the Grizzlies because they have John Morant and Jaren Jackson. But I'm a Pelican fan just because a lot of the Lakers' old young talent that we traded away to get Anthony Davis went to the Pelicans. And I'm still fans of those players like Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart. So I wish them the best. So I would like to see them in the playoffs. And if they happen to play the Lakers, that would probably be pretty cool because for them it's that storyline that the NBA wants to see.
I agree. I think I'm kind of pushing for them to get that 8th spot, and hopefully we're solid at that 1 spot. But I'd like to see it just based alone of the history, the trade history, like you said, having all those Lakers players. But ultimately, like, you have a rookie in Zion, and then LeBron in his 17th year, and we get to see them play in the playoffs against each other.
Pass the torch kind of thing.
Yeah, pass the torch kind of thing, and also like that's not something that you always get to see. You don't always get to see those players you wish like. As much as people wanted to see like LeBron and Kobe facing in the playoffs, they never got the opportunity to.
Yeah, Dwight Howard and the Magic got to ruin everything.
Exactly.
Man.
So it's like we get that opportunity to see it, and maybe it's a little premature, but we might not ever get to see it again. So.
You're right. Yeah. Think of it that way. I definitely look forward to this matchup even more. I just hope the Lakers don't have to play the Trailblazers. I think that team is the one that's going to give us probably the most issues, but. That's that. We're going to actually move on to the NFL news. There was a quick little story where Kenny Stills was protesting in regards to Breonna Taylor He was peacefully protesting, and they actually arrested him and tried to charge him for a felony, I believe, which is crazy to think about. But what are your thoughts on the situation?
It's really not surprising, as unfortunately, like, you know, it sounds terrible to say, but it's not surprising. I mean, it's kind of sad. It's frustrating. I mean, he was protesting with a large group of people who actually were all arrested, and they tried to charge all of them with a felony, and all they had to do was arrest, you know, the cops that killed Breonna Taylor, and instead they're arresting the people who are peacefully protesting for them to get arrested. It just really didn't add up.
Yeah.
And also when you see what Kenny Stills does in his communities, and he's very proactive in the community, especially when he moves to, you know, a new team, even though it's not somewhere he's familiar with, he still goes and he puts money into, you know, all the people who need it, the people that don't get the money, the assistance that they need. So to see a guy like that kind of get, you know,
yeah, he was done.
He was done dirty.
Yeah, he was done dirty. I mean, it's just crazy how this world works. How the cops, everyone's pushing for these cops that killed Breonna Taylor because they busted in her home and killed her while she was sleeping or she was lying in bed, which is pretty crazy. But they're also free walking the streets, whereas people that are using their time to fight for justice are the ones being arrested. And it's the same location too. It's like you don't want to arrest them or charge them for their actions, which had consequences where someone lost their life. But you want to arrest someone who's protesting peacefully, not bothering anybody.
Well, within their rights to do so.
And they're not bothering anybody. They just want to see justice, and just to see them be arrested instead of those who killed someone is just mind-boggling. And that's kind of what. So I watched The Bigger Picture with OBJ, Cam Newton, Todd Gurley, and Victor Cruz. They put it on YouTube. It's about an hour long. You should watch it. I think the fans should watch it as well. They touched upon the Black Lives Matter movement as well. What they plan on kind of doing in their communities now that the NFL is soon to be returning. Hopefully, they just need a plan set in place and kind of push difference in kind of what they're going to do in regards to the NFL and their communities in helping the Black Lives Matter movement. So they talk about a bunch of other stuff, but that was kind of big in terms of listening to as a fan, because me as a fan, I'm a fan of all four of those players, and just to see them generally speak as a person, it's cool. And I'm an even bigger fan after watching the video, because you got to see like the thought behind a lot of the stuff that they did throughout their career, but also the behind the scenes and their genuine self. They kind of put their authentic self on camera, which was pretty cool. So I recommend you and for all the fans to tune into that video. It's on YouTube.
I've seen a few clips from it. I've seen a few clips from it, specifically when Cam Newton is kind of talking, especially about what happened with Carolina.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's always good when you see players, you know, kind of being themselves and speaking out about the things that matter to them in their communities or in their life, or, you know, what they like to do. Because it seems like it's always just about people putting dollars and, oh, you make this amount of dollars, why are you complaining? But then you know, those same people asking why they're complaining are the ones, you know, trashing these people every day.
Or they're asking for them to speak out in matters like this.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's always good when you see, you know, people that have a platform giving back to their communities.
Yeah, and from one, I'm just happy that they were able to say something like this, and kind of have the freedom to do so on this kind of platform, because typically when players like to speak out like this to the media, their words are always like twisted, or like they'll pick quotes out of what they say and kind of make a headline out of it, so then they get bashed for it. So in this case, it's more so they can do as they please, and you're going to just see the authentic thing, and you're going to have to listen to the whole quote in order to understand where they were coming from.
It's a setting that they chose.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a comfortable setting.
Yeah. Well, to go from there, the franchise tag deadline passed.
Yep.
There was a few players who were franchise tagged, Derrick Henry and Chris Jones being two of them. What do you think about what happened around the franchise tag? Are you surprised that some deals didn't get done?
I am. So it's just, to me, it's crazy that out of everyone, all the players that were franchise tagged, only two were signed to long-term deals. Derrick Henry and Chris Jones. Rightfully so, because Chris Jones made a big impact on that defense. The Chiefs would have been crazy to let him go, because he did help in regards to that pass rush and that defense, or that front seven, on that championship run. So good for him. Derrick Henry, I'm happy he got the long-term deal that he deserves. He pretty much is that offense. That offense is built around him. The crazy thing is, on that given Monday, they said, barring any changes, they didn't see a long-term deal happening between Derrick Henry and the Titans. And then Wednesday, about an hour before the deadline, it comes through, and I'm happy for him, because the running back class, or free agent running back class next year in the draft is deep, and the free agents for the running back free agents for next year are pretty deep too. So he secured his spot in Tennessee, and he got his money. So I'm happy for him. What do you think about it?
No, yeah, I'm happy for him too. I mean, the Titans made the smart play. I mean, it seems like a lot more often teams aren't doing that. Like, they're not paying the guys that it seems like obvious they should.
Cowboys.
Texans.
That too.
I don't know, something about Texas.
That corona's getting that state for good. Got everyone having to go to the asylum.
But ultimately, I think, like I said, they made the smart play and they did what they were supposed to. I mean, the Titans know what they have in Derrick Henry, and now they have him secure there for long term. So ultimately, I like the move on both sides. Derrick Henry was a huge part. Some might even say the key part why they made it as far as they did, especially facing a favorite to win the entire
to upset them.
AFC,
the Ravens, and almost upsetting the Chiefs too.
Exactly. So they really honestly made the smart play, and they did it while the running back market is where it's at, because who knows when you see guys like Saquon get paid after CMC just got paid, what that's going to look like.
And I think they got him for a reasonable price too, being that he was the rushing leader.
Definitely.
So for them to basically get a team-friendly deal and get a player like Derrick Henry, because they are a small market team, not many players have Tennessee as like their first option. So for them being able to secure their in-house talent that they built up and drafted, and someone of his stature, I just love to see it, and I kind of am looking forward to see what that team has in store, because they did re-sign Ryan Tannehill for a long-term deal.
Yeah.
So kind of interested to see how that duo pans out for them moving forward. And then also in regards to the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, I guess, called him hours or minutes after he signed his record-breaking deal, and told Chris Jones, like, hey, I left money on the table for you to get this done. And Chris Jones said that he wasn't optimistic about getting a deal done with the Chiefs up until that phone call with Pat. Mm-hmm. And they were able to get it done. And now you got your basically pretty much your defensive anchor and your offensive anchor secured on each end. And the reason why I say that is because Tyrann Mathieu is the captain of that defense, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But Chris Jones is what kind of holds that defense down, and Patrick Mahomes is that team. So just to see them secure that, it's good to see what the future holds for those two teams.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Derrick Henry situation, where Pat Mahomes left money on the table for Chris Jones. It almost, I mean, you got to know Derrick Henry. Obviously, he's not stupid. As much as he said in interviews at the end of games last season, if you think I'm carrying a team, then I guess that's what's what's got to happen. I mean, he was obviously being a team player, but he knows what the Titans have and don't have. So I mean,
he knows what the Texans don't have either.
That's true. And that's why I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if obviously he he played a part in the fact that he didn't get as much money as he probably could have, like you said. Knowing that leaving some extra money on the table might allow them to have some more weapons on the offensive side of the ball, and he wouldn't have to feel like he's carrying a team, as everybody says. Even though I'm pretty sure he doesn't mind running through all those people.
Yeah. Outside of these two players, I was pretty surprised that no one really got a deal done. I don't want to keep harping on the Cowboys, but I was surprised that they didn't get a deal done with Dak. I figured the deadline would help their situation. It didn't, so now he's got to play out on a 1-year deal. But outside of that, the one thing that kind of blows my mind was Jacksonville obviously they weren't going to get a long-term deal done with Yannick Ngakoue, but the fact that they couldn't get a deal done in terms of trades, in terms of trading him away so that he can sign a long-term deal elsewhere is what surprised me the most. I guess he was engaged in long-term deals with other teams so that they can, ultimately trade him to that team, but it didn't pan out didn't pan out prior to the deadline, so he has to play out on this 1-year deal. Don't think it will be in Jacksonville. I think they will be able to trade him, and he's going to have to just play out and sign a long-term deal next year. But I just feel like his value is just depleting the more and the more that they hold on to him. Like, they want so much in return for him, but they're not going to get it. And I think a team's going to get him on a steal. They'll get more than the Texans did for Jadeveon Clowney, being that he didn't sign his tender. And I think Ngakoue will sign his tender, but you don't want to get to that point. And I think Jacksonville, with them holding on to him and them bickering back and forth on social media, is just making it worse for themselves.
I do believe it's kind of a lose-lose situation, as
sure.
weird as it sounds, because like you said, as the time goes on, he's only going to lose value. I feel like he would have been able to get a lot better contract this year than he's going to get at the end of next year. And I honestly feel like, him losing that money and the Jags kind of losing value in terms of if they want to do a sign and trade next year, they're not going to get as good a return on it.
And then there was also the Patriots. The Patriots had franchise tag Joe Thuney. He's a guard. But at times he's played tackle. I know when Isaiah Simmons, the first-round pick from a couple years back, was injured, who was supposed to be their left tackle, and Thuney stepped in and played tackle there. He's very versatile, and I was hoping the Giants signed him, but the Patriots kind of harped on and franchise tagged him, but they didn't sign him at all to a long-term deal. So I'm interested to see what happens in that situation. I don't think they'll trade him, but you never know with Bill Belichick.
Oh, definitely.
He seems to find value or get value from someone that he doesn't seem like he'll get value for sign. Like he'd rather get rid of you sooner rather than later. And I think this might be a situation, but with them getting Cam Newton, Thuney's going to play a big part on that offensive line. So I'm just interested to see what happens in that
beyond
situation.
This year?
Yeah, or just beyond this point.
Oh, well, I personally, you know how we've said about Bill Belichick in the past, and how he said he always gets his guys and he kind of knows where to put people. So whether or not they do decide to go with him long term after this season, I feel like that O-line is always going to be solid.
But they also just lost their offensive line coach. He retired, so that's it's going to be very interesting.
It's as uncertain as New England's ever been.
Yeah,
I feel like, or at least in recent years.
Yeah, you can say so. And then also, what happened during this franchise deadline or around the franchise tag deadline, Myles Garrett signed a deal, an extension because his contract was to expire next year due to his 5th-year option. But he signed a record-breaking extension, or I don't know if it was record-breaking, but the dollars were huge. I think he gets like $100 million guaranteed. So he got his money. I think outside of the whole situation with Mason Rudolph, he's done what he's had to. He's produced the way they projected him to produce moving into the season. So I think he deserves the money. He just needs to not have another situation like the Mason Rudolph situation.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that he's really lived up to all the potential that people thought he had as of yet coming out of college. But we've obviously seen how well he played thus far. And his ceiling is so high. He's such an athletic player, so he's a freak of nature.
For sure.
So I feel like it was a good move by the Browns, you know. Try to get him now. Try to get him extended as early as possible, so that later down the road, when he does hit that peak, you're not paying crazy amount.
I mean,
of money.
he's a cornerstone player, especially for that franchise.
100%.
He's a pass rusher, so pass rushers are valued very highly. So when you have a premier pass rusher like Myles Garrett, like you said, he's just reaching the surface now. Like he's produced, but he has way much more to his game that we've already seen. So.
Yeah. We have yet to see.
We have yet to see in the NFL. So I think it was a good move for both parts, and I'm just happy to see it because the Browns have just been terrible for a while now. They have a lot of talent now, so let's just see how it works out. But I hope they're able to turn that franchise around.
Yeah, not only that, but with a team that's kind of full of uncertainties, even as good as they kind of did get and how much they did progress from, you know, in the last 2 or 3 years. Even with all that progression, I feel like there's still so many uncertainties, and he's one player that you can kind of, other than like you said, his, you know, on the field issue with Rudolph. I feel like he's probably the most certain player on any position on that team. So like I said, that's why I feel like it was smart of them to get it done as soon as possible rather than having to pay top dollar later on, you know.
For sure. I don't know if you want to take a break before we jump into the last topic of the day, because I think we're going to be talking for this topic for probably a bit.
Is that on camera or is that off camera?
What?
What you just asked me?
It's going to be on camera. I don't care.
I don't know.
Because I didn't say.
I thought you were about to cut it.
I was. That's why I hope you said yeah, and then I was going to just say we'll be back to. But okay, we'll be back with more balls deep. Oh, brother, this guy stinks. Well, we're back, and the one last topic that we had to speak about that I felt like we were going to talk about in depth was the Washington football scandal. Shit has popped off.
Shit hit the fan.
Shit hit the fan for sure. I mean, I know in past episodes we talked about them changing their name because of all the backlash they've received. And a lot of people think that it was almost a cover-up because they knew this time was coming, and being exposed in terms of their scandal that they have going on over there in Washington. So when I reference the scandal, I'm speaking of the 15 women who worked for the Washington football franchise, allegedly were verbally assaulted or inappropriately. Were spoken to inappropriately during their time with the team, and they were sexually harassed by former scouts and members of owner Daniel Snyder's inner circle. Since then, the first person to speak out on the news was head coach and GM Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera has been huge in regards to the push for women in the NFL. He's been big on giving women opportunities in the NFL. So it doesn't surprise me that he spoke out, but to me it was just crazy that he was the first one to speak out on it rather than the owner, Daniel Snyder. But Dan Snyder came out on Friday with a quote or saying, or not a saying, but a statement. And it was pretty much like any statement you'd get from any franchise. But since then, Washington has hired attorney Beth Wilkinson to conduct a deep dive into the organization's past culture. Seriously. So a deep dive into the organization's past culture. And I'm not taking much from this deep dive into the past culture thing because I just feel like they're just doing it just to do it. And they're going to eventually kind of just brush it under the rug like they've been doing it for years. So, like, I'm not a big believer in them being able to resolve this under Daniel Snyder. But what are your thoughts on it?
I did hear about Dan Snyder's statement basically saying, you know, he's all for a fair investigation because he knows none of this is going on. I think it's pretty wild accusations to just come out of nowhere. I can't really put thoughts together because it's probably the wildest thing I've ever heard, at least in terms of sports franchises. But it's crazy. I almost joked about it, saying it was somebody from the media waiting years and years with all this information and just waiting for the right time to release it. It's just like, it came out of nowhere. When you told me about it, I was just like,
what?
I heard it from you first. I'm like, dude, that sounds like made up.
Sounds like something that would happen in a movie almost. So
yeah. So for
crazy.
me, like I said, it's hard for me to even put thoughts together. I mean, obviously you wanna see the investigation go and take its full course, and you wanna know the full details of what actually happened. But it's not looking good.
Not at all.
Obviously they get found guilty of this stuff. Mostly anybody that's on that team currently, other than Ron Rivera, can no longer be a part of that franchise.
Or like if you were on the part of the franchise prior to this season, you kind of gotta go.
How are you gonna be able to separate the scouts who did and the scouts who didn't?
Almost everyone that was named within the article has since retired or been fired. So.
But they're never gonna be able to work for another franchise again. These people
most
are probably gonna be
sure.
banned from football.
Oh, for sure.
They should be.
Oh yeah.
If they're found guilty,
Yeah, I'm not disputing that, but it's just crazy that Dan Snyder came out with a statement, and they ultimately didn't deny the accusations that were coming forward, which is mind-boggling, to say the least. And so there's 15 women who spoke out. Only one of those 15 did so publicly, like putting her name on it. And the reason why is because they had a non-disclosure agreement with the team, and the team didn't want to waive the non-disclosure agreement in order for them to do so and put their name on it, and in a sense come forward publicly. So the fact that they didn't pull the non-disclosure agreement for the victims to speak out says all you need to hear, almost. Yeah. And it's not the first time with this franchise. I know there was news in like 2018 about a time in 2013 where they had like a cheerleading scandal almost, where they took a trip to Costa Rica, and upon arrival they collected their passports, and they ultimately held them hostage over there and forced them to take like a nude photo shoot, and in doing so they would then give access to those photos to like their season ticket holders or their what I'm trying to think of what it's called, their basically Dan Snyder's inner circle, or their club owners, not club owners, the suite owners. Yeah, the suite owners, or the ticket holders that are within the suites. They had access to it, which is crazy to think that like it's my personal identification and you're holding it against me in order for me to do this. So it's not the first time with this franchise. It certainly won't be the last as long as Dan Snyder's the owner. I know fans have been against Dan Snyder since the beginning. They've wanted him to go, and since this news dropped, they definitely want him to get the fuck out of here right now.
He's not good at putting together a football team, and he's not good at being a decent human.
No, and the thing is, like, I think the only way to fix the situation is to out him like the NBA did with Donald Sterling. Yeah, the situations are totally different. Donald Sterling was more so being racist and had dealt with racism. This one has to do with sexual assault, but now in times like this, where we're big on sexual assault.
They're just as serious.
Yeah, but like sexual assault has even been a bigger topic as of late.
Oh, definitely.
So like in these times, it's even worse.
Yeah, and the timing of it.
Yeah, the timing of it
really
all.
Just the craziest part to me is the fact that, everybody's been pushing for them to change their name, obviously for years now, but this is the biggest push we've seen now, obviously seeing that they're actually going through with it.
Yeah.
And then just the timing of it, just with all that already going on and now all this information coming out, that was just the biggest shock,
Yeah, and I mean, there was a few tweets that kind of, or there was one tweet that stood out to me about someone speaking on the situation. They said Dan Snyder may not have been directly implicated in the harassment, but when half the executive team acts in such a repugnant manner to female employees over 10 years, it falls on him. And that's exactly why I think he needs to be outed. It's not even just about, it's even worse now than it would have been back then. Sexual assault should not happen at all.
Yeah.
Like, these women are there for
work.
Professional for profession. They, like, you need to be as professional with females as you are with male employees, and the fact that they were forced to go to work and be uncomfortable for such a long period of time, and if they did speak out, then they would have felt the consequences because they, like an article said, they didn't want to speak out because they didn't want to hear the saying like anyone else would love to be in your shoes, or someone would drop at the sound of a dime to be here where you are right now.
They were ultimately they were powerless and they were taken advantage of by, you know.
Yeah, so you can't tell me, like, even though he wasn't implicated within these harassments within the post, you can't tell me you own a franchise and has happened for at least a decade and you have no idea what's going on.
If this is found out to be true, there's no way he gets out of this.
No.
Because like you said, ultimately, if he had no involvement in it, just the fact that all the people he has to, that basically, you know, have to, anything that happens, they have to go through him. You know, they work for him. He's supposed to keep those people in check. So that stuff, there's no way that stuff goes on and he can't see it. There's no way that stuff is going on in his stadium, throughout his team, that deep. You know, with season ticket holders and sweet ticket buyers and all his cheerleaders. There's no way that goes on, and he doesn't have, you know, any knowledge of it.
Yeah.
And even if he doesn't, I just don't see. I think that's even worse. You know.
Oh, for
it
sure.
It tells you how much he's actually, you know.
And it's
matters to the team.
And they said basically like he unconsciously allowed it to happen for the simple fact that like he would make statements, or he unconsciously allowed that atmosphere to go on because he made statements to an executive who was a former cheerleader. He would kind of make fun of him about being a high school cheerleader, and that almost allowed those that were watching within the franchise to think it was okay to have that kind of behavior, and that's what allowed such actions to happen or ultimately lead to. But as for what you were saying is, like, if it comes true or if it becomes, it's proven that it was true, there's no way. I think in order for that to happen, the NFL is going to have to do an investigation of their own, because I think this attorney that they hired, the Washington franchise hired, is also going to maybe out the people who were fired or already retired, like they already separated themselves from the franchise. They might out them as a scapegoat and ultimately save those that are still within the franchise and almost give Dan Snyder what he wants, which is still give him the ownership of the team. Yeah. So I think the NFL is going to have to do an investigation of their own. I don't think that taking draft picks away or almost like these penalties that they've been giving teams like the Patriots or fines or stuff like that, I don't think that's going to do anything to help the situation because it's not a football matter. It's more people's matter, and the only way to fix this is to take the head off of the snake. And none of this would have happened without Dan Snyder. Yeah. Under a different ownership, things could have been different. I'm not saying they would have been different because you never know, but Ron Rivera, I know for sure now that he's there, he's going to try his best to change the atmosphere and there because he's always been big about women, and he's already spoken out about his daughter being part of the organization now, so he's definitely not going to let that happen. So he's going to try his best, but he's a coach and he can only do so much. Yeah. So you need an owner, you need a clean sweep almost, get a different owner in there. Get a different executive team. I'm not saying everyone on the executive team was guilty, but you just need a clean slate and ultimately just move forward. Because this was a franchise that was a proud franchise at one point, winning Super Bowls, and since Dan Snyder's taken over, it's just gone to dumps.
Yeah. So, and ultimately, any investigation coming from the Washington football team's camp is already compromised. After all the shady shit that they've done over, like you said, the past decade, you can't trust anything that, that they're doing. You can't trust an investigation that they put forth.
Yeah.
So it's going to really take a big, huge dive and like a really in-depth investigation from the NFL to figure out exactly what happened.
I just hope the penalties are more than just what they have been accustomed to giving. But since then, they have also hired Julie Donaldson to its lead broadcasting crew, which would make her the first woman to be a regular member of a NFL radio broadcast team. So her title is considered the Senior VP of Media and Content. She comes from NBC Universal. I just want to say congratulations to you. I mean, it sucks that you have to enter in a situation like this. I think it was a way. I don't know if Ron Rivera had anything to do with the hire, but when seeing this, I come to two conclusions. Ron Rivera had a big influence on this hire, and or this is a cover up for what's going on. Like, hey, I have all these allegations about these women about saying sexual assault. Let me bring in a woman, ultimately be the first in her position to do so in the NFL, and in a position of power almost, and to kind of ease the backlash on this situation. Those are the two conclusions that came to me when I seen the hire. But outside of that, congratulations to Julie Donaldson. It's well deserved, but it just sucks to go in a situation like this.
And it does suck, but ultimately with all the news that comes out, and like I said, if this comes to be true, I feel there is no better, as crazy as it might sound, I feel like there might not be a better time for a move like that. I feel she can't be in a better position. Because I feel like I said, ultimately I think things will get taken care of. I don't think that anybody that had a hand in that will be a part of that team, including Dan Snyder. So now with her being in that position, she gets to be a cornerstone in changing,
of the future.
Yeah, changing the future of that franchise, changing, the direction, and making it more positive, impacting it in a way that, she may not have been able to if all this was, still in the dark or in the shadows. So ultimately, I feel like it's probably the best time for her to step in a position like this.
Take advantage of the opportunity.
And it's one way to look at it, but it might be the best way for her to look at it. For her to, actually want to go there and do her job every day.
And I'm sure she's not looking at it as, hey, I got this opportunity because of this. She's looking at it as an opportunity where I got to take advantage. And I'm not saying she wouldn't have got this opportunity if it wasn't for the situation, but I think the situation definitely helped her situation about getting the opportunity. I think the Ron Rivera hire was great, and I was mad that they got him rather than the Giants, just because he's a great coach, a great person, and I think he's going to help that direction and that atmosphere of that franchise. And I think just like the Ron Rivera hiring, this Julie Donaldson hiring, like you said, will only help the future of this franchise. She's in a position of power, so that might just lead to more opportunities for women, which we harped on or emphasized on in the past episode. We hope that more situations like this happen. And we're speaking about giving more women opportunities and giving them positions of power. Not
and her being able to change the culture now and make it more positive, atmosphere for women.
But now, do I think this is ultimately a way to cover up, or not necessarily a cover up, but a way to ease the backlash? I do. I think it was more so on Dan Snyder's part because he knows what's coming for him. And I think it's still going to come for him. The light's going to come to the... what's in the dark will come to the light eventually. And I think his time, it will come. And he ultimately will be gone. Like you said, a lot of the people will be gone in that franchise.
Should have known that team regardless.
But two people that we know for sure that are going to be there for the future or beyond this season will be Ron Rivera and Julie Donaldson. I think these two people are going to play a big part of the culture and atmosphere in changing what is kind of going on within the scandal and these allegations.
And hopefully whoever buys this team can, it is somebody that takes this just as serious.
Yeah, because this is not okay. And the NFL has had ownership problems for a while, and they need to make almost an example out of Dan Snyder. I don't want, and the reason why I say so is to show other owners that it's not okay to do things like this because there's repercussions for your actions. And I think make an example out of Dan Snyder so that other ownerships or other owners don't follow suit. Almost like what the NBA did with Donald Sterling.
Definitely. With that, that's the end of the episode. Thanks for tuning in this week to Balls Deep Podcast. Make sure you share our videos, leave comments, show some love. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio Podcast,
Google Podcasts.
Anywhere
you get your podcast. If you're a sports fan,
almost everything.
Which you got to be a sports fan to be listening to this podcast. But
unless you were looking for something else when you looked up Balls Deep, I don't know.
So if you're a sports fan, this is awesomely the podcast for you. I mean, we're sports fans just like everyone else, and we're just here to kind of give our analysis and our opinion. And kind of goof around and be our genuine selves. So if you want to laugh and you want true opinions on sports, this is the podcast for you. So just tune in and kind of show love. Just make sure to comment. We want to interact with you guys. So just do your part because we're for sure going to do our part. Peace.
Till next time.
You're talking about balls deep. I'm talking about balls deep. We're talking about balls deep in love. I'm talking about balls deep. My boy's talking about balls deep. We're talking about balls deep in love.